Hello world! Welcome back to the Intro to Python series. In this video, we will be covering loops in Python 3. Loops are flow control constructs that are invoked when a block of code needs to be executed multiple times. Each loop is controlled via a conditional that controls whether the script should keep executing the code block again or break out of the loop. Python 3 offers three types of loops and loop handling: a while loop, a for loop, and nested loops. A while loop repeats a statement or block of statements while a predefined condition is true. The condition is checked before the loop's body is executed. Let's demonstrate a basic use case for a while loop. Let's assign a variable to be our index for the while loop. Now let's write a while loop statement with a condition that will tell our while loop to continue iterating if our index is less than 10. Let's have our while loop print our index variable and increment it by 1 after each iteration. After running the script, we can see that our while loop iterated 10 times. This is because after each iteration, we increment our index by a value of 1. And once our index reaches a value of 10, our loop will exit because our index is no longer less than 10, as we had defined in our while loop conditional. Let's try removing our increment statement for our index. Now our loop will iterate infinitely because our index will always be less than 10. We want to avoid having loops that run forever in our script because our script will never stop executing on its own. This will bog down our system's resources until we forcibly exit the program, and could even crash the system if left alone for long enough, depending on the system's specs. Let's move on to for loops. A for loop executes a sequence of statements a certain number of times depending on the limits set on the loop variable. The loop variable is what is used to keep track of the number of times or the index of what iteration the for loop is currently on. The loop will break out of its execution once the range limit is met, which is just the upper bounds of the iteration count that was defined in the for loop statement. Let's write the equivalent of our previous while loop statement, but this time in the form of a for loop. Our for loop conditional denotes that if our index I is in range of 0 to 9, then increment our index by 1. Having only one number passed to the range function means that our starting index is 0. This is the same as if we were to write range 0 to 10. The second number defines the non-inclusive upper bounds of how high the index can go before the loop exits. The index will always end one before the index defined by our second number. Now that we've broken down the for loop statement, let's run the script. As we can see, we get the same output that we got from the while loop. For loops can always mimic while loops and vice versa if the programmer knows how to convert one into the other. Let's go on to nested loops. Like nested if statements, nested loops are just one or more while or for loops inside another while or for loop. In other words, a while loop can be nested within another while loop or another for loop, and a for loop can be nested within another for loop or another while loop. Let's do a simple example of a nested while loop inside of a for loop. Let's define a list of different types of nuts. Now let's begin with our outer loop to loop through each nut in our list. Let's define an index variable that will tell our inner while loop what iteration we're on. Finally, let's make our while loop that will print each of our nuts in the list 4 times in a row before breaking out and moving on to the next iteration of our outer for loop. We see that our script returns exactly what we told it to do with our nested loop. Our outer for loop's role was to loop through each item in our list, and our inner while loop's role was to print each of our nuts 4 times before breaking out, which is why we set the conditional to execute the while loop if our index is less than 4, starting from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, which are our 4 iterations. There are 2 main loop control statements you need to be aware of: break and continue. The break statement will immediately terminate whatever innermost loop it resides in, and will transfer execution of the script to whatever line directly follows outside of the loop's scope. Let's use our previous nested loop example to demonstrate the break statement in action. Let's define a condition in our nested while loop that checks to see if the index is 3. If the index is 3, we will break out of our while loop. As we can see, this caused each nut in our list to only print 3 times, because we told our script to break out of the inner while loop if our index is equal to 3, which would represent the 4th iteration in our while loop. Now let's demonstrate the continue statement. Let's skip one of our nuts in the list. Let's define an if condition in our outer for loop that states if the item we're currently on is cashews, then continue to the next iteration. As shown, cashews is not printed out because we told our outer for loop to continue to its next iteration if the index we're at in the list is equal to cashews. And we're done scripting for this video. If you enjoyed the content discussed in this video, please drop a like and subscribe to show your support and help the YouTube algorithm to better interpret the channel. Stay tuned for more videos, and please provide any feedback, good or bad, we don't discriminate, in the comments section down below. Have a nice one.